Today, guys, I'm going to react to Try Not to Get Scared. I'm doing it before at Halloween Day, so it's right now October 21st. So let's get to it.
Cycle. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us.
We used to steal your parents' liquor and climb to the roof. Talk about the fuck was that? Well, I get dragged down the fucking hole. I swear to God. What? Get up, Bertie. All the time we turn around, brothers gather round, always looking at me up and down, looking at my.
வாட்ஸ்அப் வந்தாலும் வந்துச்சு குழந்தைங்க பிடிக்கிற புத்தகத்துல தான் வருது பொம்பளைங்க பிடிக்கிற புத்தகம் வா என் நம்பர் கொடுத்துருங்க உங்களுக்கு இன் பர்டிகுலர் யாருன்னு இருக்கா அப்படி யாருன்னு ஷூர்
And his name is John Cena.
பத்திரமா பின்னாடி தான் இருக்கும் வைன் ஷாப்பே 12 மணிக்கு தான் திறக்கும் அது கூட தெரியாது ரெண்டே நிமிஷத்துல வரேன் நேரா கிஃப்ட் ஷாப் வரேன் அடுத்து வைன் ஷாப் ஓகே பெரிய கதை அம்மா நீங்க அதுக்குன்னு நீங்க லவ் பண்ற சரி எனக்கு ஒரு டவுட் என்னவா லவ் ஃபெயிலியர்னா எல்லாருமே தாண்டி
perched at the peak, came across. Somebody there? Hello?
Okay, guys, just one more. I'm gonna do one more scary video before I end off this video.
என்ன நியாயம் இருக்கு? அவன் போய் சொல்லிருப்பா. சும்மா சும்மா போய் சொல்றா. You uneducated fellow. ஒன்னையார உள்ள விட்டது? வெளில போ. ஏய், என்ன பண்ற நீ? ரவுடி தண்டை பண்ண போறியா? எதுக்கு புக்கெல்லாம் எடுக்கிற? என்ன பண்ண போற? எந்த சப்ஜெக்ட்ல இருந்து உங்களுக்கு கிளாஸ் எடுக்கணும் சார்? டிஇயா? டிசியா? இல்ல டிஎஸ்பியா? சொல்லுங்க. நானும் டிஇ படிச்சவன் தான் சார். முதல்ல என்ன நடந்ததுன்னு தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறம் பேசுங்க. May I talk to you for 5 minutes? Take your seat. நீங்க ஒரு முறை தான் பாத்தீங்க சார். ஆனா அவ
Number 1. So a few years ago on Halloween night, when I was around 14, me and a few friends of mine stupidly decided to take a walk through the park with nothing but our phones to light the way. I didn't really want to go. We were long past our curfew after all. But my friends decided that cutting through the park would be a great way to lose ourselves for another half hour or so and delay us going home. We weren't vandalizing anything or looking to cause any trouble. We were just being irresponsible kids looking to extend our time outdoors. Not even 10 minutes into our walk, we hear this horrid scream from the nearby trees. I didn't pause to think. I just booked it out of there, following my friend Daniel. Our friends David and Alex jogged behind us, chastising us for being cowards, reminding us that it was Halloween, and someone was probably just playing a prank on us. I didn't care. I was freaked out, and I was looking for an excuse to leave the group and run home. We paused to catch our breath at the entrance to the park, and I happened to glance behind me. From the direction we came from, I thought I could make out a large, dark figure approaching us from where we had been originally standing. I pointed the figure out to my friends and asked if they could see it too. Keep in mind that there were no lights on in the park, so what small amount we could see was only due to faint starlight. Daniel and David couldn't see anything, but Alex thought he noticed the approaching shape as well. Not giving a damn about looking like a coward, I pleaded with the guys to leave the park. Suddenly the scream came again, closer this time. We all leapt out of our skins and took off running in different directions. I sprinted out of the park and blindly ran across the road towards the safety of building lights. Alex eventually caught up with me down the sidewalk, but he had no idea where Dave and Dan had disappeared to. Alex was actually laughing and putting on a brave face, convinced it was some really creepy yet clever dude who was out to scare kids that night. I wasn't convinced either way. All I knew for sure was that I wanted to get home. I dialed Dan's phone to figure out what had happened to him, but after 2 attempts the call went unanswered. Alex and I continued to walk down the sidewalk in the safety of the streetlights, with other people within sight, as I tried calling David. David answered on the second ring. His voice was frantic, and he whispered that he was hiding somewhere in the park, and that he heard Dan's screams as the figure caught him. I froze in my tracks, and nearly started sobbing in panic, which made Alex start to freak out. David was begging for me to call the cops, when from the phone I heard screaming again, and Dave's phone went dead. I immediately called 911 and frantically tried to explain to the operator about how some crazy psycho had kidnapped our friend in the park, and another one of our friends was in trouble. The operator, to her credit, helped me calm down and had me explain what happened from the beginning, but ultimately seemed convinced that I was the victim of a Halloween prank. Regardless, she told me that a police car was en route to check out the park. Alex and I called our parents and frantically paced around like caged animals until my dad showed up, shortly followed by the police. The officers questioned us, and we tried calling both Daniel and David's cell phones again, but neither of them answered. One of the officers went into the park with a flashlight, while the other stayed with us and talked to my dad, asking him if he knew how to get in contact with Daniel and David's parents. After a few minutes, the first police officer came back with David, who was shaking and was as white as a sheet, saying that the figure had found him and had chased him through the trees, cackling like a maniac. They didn't find Daniel until it was practically dawn, and by then, myself, Alex, and David. Daniel had lost his phone and had been found in a utility shed with a massive bruise on his forehead. He told officers that a man in a clown mask had grabbed him and dragged him to the shed, holding his hand over his mouth roughly enough to leave marks on his face. The utility shed hadn't been locked, but the door was old and warped, and it was very difficult to open from the inside. Daniel's parents wanted to press charges for assault and kidnapping, but the man was never found. Daniel refuses to talk to us about what happened, or if the man in the clown mask said anything to him. It's impossible to know what his true intentions were. Rather, it was some sick prank, or something far more sinister. But the fact after he already had one kid, and tried to catch a second, leads me to think that it was the latter. Please be cautious on Halloween night. Don't be so quick to dismiss creepy behavior as harmless fun, because that nearly got me and my friends in serious trouble. Number 2. On Halloween of 2014, my friends and I went on one of those Trail of Terror haunted maze adventures, and I legitimately mean it was a maze. I know most attractions like that are just one long winding tunnel that's laid out like a maze, but this one was actually designed for you to potentially get lost in. How it worked was that you waited in line to enter a building, and on the second floor you exited down and out into the maze, using a retractable fire escape stairway. That way you couldn't simply retrace your steps. Throughout the maze you would encounter multiple chambers with a different theme, such as a slaughterhouse, a cemetery, a dungeon, and a torture chamber. There were dozens of actors in various costumes who would leap out at you, plenty of flashing strobe lights, and ear-piercing sound effects that made communicating with each other close to impossible. In case you legitimately started to panic, because you were feeling overwhelmed or claustrophobic or sick, and needed to get out of there, there were various people in Ghostbuster costumes with illuminated proton packs who would lead you out of the maze to safety. My friends and I were beyond stoked for this experience. There was 7 of us all together. Myself, my girlfriend, my sister, her boyfriend, my cousin, and 2 of my co-workers. The wait in line took close to 90 minutes. And when we reached the fire escape, we were handed glow stick bracelets to put around our wrists, given a brief safety lecture, and then they allowed 5 people to go down the steps. My girlfriend and I lagged behind, while the rest of our group went in, and we had to wait another 5 minutes. Just for some clarification, I'm 6'3", and my girlfriend Sadie is a petite 5'0", who was clinging to me like we were waist deep in shark-infested waters. The ironic thing was that Sadie was one of the toughest chicks I knew. She worked at an animal shelter and frequently had to deal with unruly stray dogs, who need to be held down sometimes in order to be given medication. She had been bitten at least 3 times, and while being in a cage with a real-life angry dog didn't bother her, a completely staged horror theme park experience was making her tremble like a leaf. She was also decked out in tattoos. I guess physical pain didn't bother her nearly as much as psychological terror. She asked the staff member by the ladder if the costumed actors were allowed to touch us in any way, to which he said absolutely not, but they would get into our personal space quite a bit, and to be prepared for jump scares and close contact. Sadie swore to me that if I let go of her hand, she would burn all the stuff in my front lawn of our rental house, and I believed her, so I promised not to leave her behind. When it was finally our turn, the attendant let us pass and go down into the maze with 3 other people. We had been inside for less than a minute, when a clown with fangs leapt from the shadows behind us, and a bloated corpse reached out to us suddenly from a makeshift grave. Sadie was shrieking and practically crawling up my back, while I was laughing and enjoying the scares. I knew we wouldn't have much of a chance finding the rest of our group, so instead of trying to search for them, I just let myself wander and have fun with the experience, weaving back and forth up and down the tunnels and entering random chambers without worrying about quickly finding the exit. We passed a long-haired chick from the ring, crawling out of a fake TV. A werewolf sprung out of some fake bushes behind us, and a guy with a chainsaw chased us through a mock cornfield. My favorite part was when a guy dressed as a zombie, clearly having fun with Sadie's distress, decided to slowly stalk us for about 5 minutes, always just about an arm's length behind us. It's hard to keep track of time when your heart is racing, but I would estimate that we had been there for maybe half an hour, when we passed a guy dressed in a Ghostbuster outfit. He did a really good Dan Aykroyd impersonation when Sadie asked him if we were near the exit, and he said that we were heading in the wrong direction. He offered to lead us back, but I was still having fun. Find our own way. Sadie kicked me in the shin for that one. We wandered through a torture chamber with a guy in a Saw movie type trap, screaming for us to kill him, then entered into what looked like a cannibalistic sweatshop, where people in very gruesome and realistic costumes that made them look like they had been hacked into pieces screamed at us to run, while fake blood ran from their prosthetic wounds. I think that Sadie was starting to finally lighten up, because she was smiling nervously and not clinging to me constantly. We were almost out of the room when a sweaty, grotesque-looking butcher, wearing welder's goggles and a blood-coated apron, leapt out of the shadows and swung a prop machete at us. Sadie screamed and reflexively slapped the guy so hard, his goggles slipped down his face. She immediately stepped back in shock, and I stepped between them and apologized to the guy, but he had already broken character and was looking over my shoulder at Sadie, asking her what the hell her problem was. I understand why he was upset, but I wasn't going to let him talk to her like that. I made him look at me and repeated to him again that we were sorry and we were leaving. I'm not sure if the loud noises and flashing lights made the words we exchanged completely unintelligible, or he thought I was trying to square off with him, or if the guy was just a dick, whose wounded pride was overpowering his professionalism, but he shoved me hard in the chest with both hands and shouted at me to back off. I had a good 3 inches on this guy, and I probably could have laid him out if I wanted to, but instead I raised my hands and told him again that we were leaving. Sadie was shaking with embarrassment. We walked out of the room and through an area where a guy in a Hannibal Lecter mask hissed at us through glass, but we were barely fazed by it. We were both feeling kind of awkward. After another few minutes, I had mostly forgotten about the butcher, and Sadie was insisting that we find the exit. I decided that she was right, and we located another Ghostbuster who was leading out another group of people and followed along behind. The procession wasn't moving very fast, and I happened to glance behind me, and I noticed the butcher was following us. Not in a creepy, stalking us kind of way, but just walking normally, keeping pace behind us, and he was staring right at Sadie. Sadie has short hair dyed silver, practically white, so she was very easy to pick out of a crowd, even in the semi-darkness. I wasn't sure what to do, confront the guy or just ignore him, but in a matter of seconds he closed the distance, and I suddenly didn't feel comfortable having my back turned. I spun around and held out my hand, as non-confrontational as possible, and I asked the guy to hold up. The guy then full-on took a swing at me, but the flashing lights made him misjudge the distance, and he ended up making contact with my left shoulder. I shoved him back hard. Then he came at me again. This time his fist made contact with my face. I launched myself forward and put my fist into his gut and knocked him flat out on his back. Suddenly there was a mob of people between us, both actors in costume and people just wandering the maze. I turned and walked out before the guy could get back up on his feet. Sadie was screaming profanities back at the butcher, but I took her by her arm and gently guided her back towards the exit. We were met by security who walked us over to the parking lot and took our statements. Sadie and I explained what happened, and I insisted that despite the bruise on my cheek, I didn't want to call the cops or press charges. I just wanted to make them aware that the butcher actor they had working there was mentally unstable. A few other witnesses were interviewed, and we were allowed to leave, with a representative of the attraction offering us an apology. Apparently several fights had broken out that night, though more with impatient people waiting in the line than in the actual maze. I never saw the butcher again, and I don't know what happened to him. But the creepiest thing didn't happen until the following day, when I read online that later that night, a young woman had been attacked with a knife in the parking lot by one of the actors. She wasn't badly hurt and only needed a few stitches in her hand, but the attacker hadn't been identified or apprehended, but the girl could vaguely make out that he was wearing some kind of apron. The young woman who had been attacked had a petite build with short blonde hair, who I imagine looks a lot like Sadie in the dark. I have no idea if it was the same guy or not, but the woman claimed that she wasn't robbed, and the guy ran off when she started screaming. Maybe he realized that he had confronted the wrong woman and took off running. Sadie and I are still together, and we've gone back to other haunted attractions since, and fortunately haven't had any other unpleasant exchanges. But if I were to recognize that guy on the street, I'll probably knock his teeth out. Number 3. Last Halloween, I was invited to a company bonfire party in the mostly wooded area of upstate New York. I wasn't really all that interested in going, but given that we could bring an entourage with us, my friends bullied me into accepting. The company I worked for was hosting, and the venue was going to have an open bar, so I begrudgingly went shopping to find a halfway decent costume to wear. The night of the party, I assigned myself as the designated driver, and I drove my 4 rowdy friends to the party. I flashed my company ID in the parking lot to the attendant, and we wandered over towards the festivities. Most of my friends had gone with very elaborate and flashy costumes with props and makeup, but I had simply bought an Assassin's Creed hoodie. The party was loud and intense, with music blaring and booze flowing, and people ultimately acting like in no way their actions would be recorded and posted online the following day. I eventually got bored of the noise and drunken behavior, and wandered up into the woods with my friends, Leon and Claire. And yes, go ahead and make a Resident Evil joke. The irony is not lost on me. Anyway, there were signs prompting us to stick to the designated paths, which of course we ignored, and ventured deeper into the woods, looking for a quiet spot to get a good look at the night sky. We were far enough out of earshot of the party that we could hear ourselves think again, and we lit up our flashlights on our phones and tried to find a comfortable spot so we could sit down. After a moment, we heard Leon call over to us and navigated our way over to him. He didn't have to say anything. We saw it as soon as we saw him. Lying on the ground in front of him, on the forest floor, was a queen-sized mattress, which would have been surprising on its own. But what was even more strange was that there was bright red stains all over it. Kate bent over and without hesitation felt the mattress with her 2 fingers. She was a phlebotomist and was very comfortable around blood. "It's still wet," she said after a moment. "Wait, so it's real?" Leon asked. "No way," I said with confidence. "We're at a Halloween party, guys. It's a prop of some kind." "All the way up here in the woods, where we almost didn't even find it?" Claire looked at me incredulously. I examined the mattress again, and shifted the angle of my flashlight. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was a clean, unmarked spot right in the center of the mattress, about the average size of a torso. I felt my mouth go dry. "Claire, in theory, if someone lost this much blood, would they be alright?" She didn't even hesitate with her answer. "Not unless they were just outside the ER. "Hey guy, come here," Leon called out. Claire and I glanced up and saw another partygoer come forward out of the shadows. This person was wearing a very convincing Jason Voorhees costume, complete with the iconic hockey mask, and was carrying what looked to be a hunting crossbow. And this wasn't some skinny dork dressing up like Jason. This guy was at least 6 foot and had a stocky build. Leon kept talking. "We found this mattress out here, man. Did you see or hear anything?" The guy didn't respond, only glanced around at the 3 of us. And suddenly there was tension in the air, and I had that uncomfortable feeling, like I just walked in on 2 people who were talking about me. Claire stood up and looked at the masked figure. "Are you with the company?" she asked. Suddenly the guy raised the crossbow slowly and aimed it directly at Claire. "Whoa, whoa," I called out, and shoved Kate sideways right as the guy fired the crossbow. and the bolt sailed past her arm and stabbed itself into the tree behind her. "Oh my God, that crossbow is real! Run!" I shouted. Leon shoved the guy as he made to load another bolt into the crossbow, and we each ran in 3 different directions. I immediately shut off my flashlight so the guy couldn't take aim at me. I sprinted towards the light of the bonfire, stumbling twice and skinning my knee. I ran out of the woods directly over to the DJ's booth and started gasping about there being a guy with a crossbow in the woods, but they paid almost no attention. I tried to speak with one of the company's owners, but he was pretty drunk and completely unconcerned by the news. Claire called the cops from the parking lot, but after we waited an hour in my locked car and no one showed, we gathered the rest of my friends and drove off. The following day we went to the police station in person to report the incident, but it's been nearly a year and we haven't heard back about any kind of investigation or report. I still have no idea what the context was of what we found that night. I don't know if someone was attacked on the mattress and we wandered into a fresh crime scene, or if it was all some kind of gag, and now we're on YouTube somewhere looking like idiots. But what bothers me the most was that in the moment, the seriousness of the situation felt very real, and when that crossbow fired, I felt a sense of extreme danger, so bad that my fight or flight reaction kicked in immediately. Was that all real? And do we live in a world where attempted murder could so easily slip through the cracks? I don't think I'll celebrate Halloween this year.
That's right, guys. Happy Halloween. So have a nice day, guys. Halloween is done now. If you don't believe me, it is done. It's right now 10:40. No. But guys, we have to end off this video. Peace out, guys. Happy Halloween. And I'll make more videos whenever I have time, okay? Bye.